Greenwood Cemetery in Decatur, Illinois is one of the most haunted places on Earth. Its dark, long, and sordid history has helped make it one of the most infamous burial sites on the planet. Today, on Scream to Screen, we're going to take a deep dive into the haunted story of Greenwood Cemetery. But before we do that, make sure you subscribe to The Graveyard Shift and let us know in the comments which true-life ghost stories you'd like for us to cover in the future. What is now Greenwood Cemetery in Decatur, Illinois, was first used as a sacred burial ground by Native Americans of the Illiniwek Confederation hundreds of years before any Europeans ever lived or were buried there. The first log cabin erected in the area was in 1820 and belonged to a white settler named William Downing. As the next few years passed, more frontiersmen continued to arrive from the east, adding to the region's new hardscrabble population. Life was hard for these people. It was unpredictable. Anything from weather to illnesses could wipe out an entire family swiftly. Due to necessity, this meant that there was not much of a burial custom for these frontiersmen and their families. Nothing more than a few prayers and Bible passages over an open hole in the ground. The corpses would be placed in these holes without benefit of coffins and were often only wrapped in a simple winding sheet and left to the earth. As the years went on and the deaths increased, many of the settlers began searching for a communal place to bury their dead, which led them to burying in places that the Native Americans had also used, the site which would eventually become Greenwood Cemetery. Both the Europeans and the Illiniwek used the area for burial a brief time together, but soon enough, the white settlers drove away the Native Americans from their own land. Unsurprising to any student of history, the white settlers did this with an act of cold-blooded murder. The late historian Roy V. Ternius wrote about this event and dubbed it the Moonshiners and the Indians. Based on the records, it is thought to have occurred in the late 1820s, possibly 1828. Regardless of the exact year, one day in the spring of the year in question, a small group of settlers had constructed a crude liquor still and were using it to make moonshine from corn. Historian Ternius speculates that the settlers were busy sampling their own product when they noticed a group of the Illiniwek passing by. What happened next is unknown, but for some reason, the settlers decided to pursue the Illiniwek through the woods. Whether or not this attack and pursuit were provoked remain a mystery, but what is known is that the Illiniwek were chased through the woods and that they were forced into running up a hill in the direction of the burying grounds. Now cornered, the Illiniwek had nowhere to seek cover when the white settlers opened fire on them, cutting them down mercilessly on the side of the hill. While most of the Native Americans had been driven out of the Sangamon River region by the middle of the 1820s, the few scattered tribes that remained still far outnumbered the white settlers, which is probably why the Moonshiners decided to conceal the bodies of the Illiniwek in a shallow ravine on the side of the hill where they were shot. The bodies were dragged into a ditch and stones were piled over them. The resulting crude grave can still be seen on the side of the hill in the southwestern part of the cemetery. White settlers continued burying their dead in the area, and by 1857, the cemetery was incorporated as Greenwood Cemetery. Ghost stories soon began to spread during the 1920s when the cemetery fell into disrepair. The Cemetery Association had become financially destitute at the time, with upkeep and repairs no longer being able to be paid for. The Great Depression had swept all of America, and even death was no guarantee of shelter from it. By the 1950s, what had once been a beautiful bucolic cemetery had fallen into a haven of lowlifes, criminals, and reprobates of varying stripes. There were reports of gangs using the cemetery as a meetup spot at night to avoid the police. There were even rumors of cults using the grounds for various black magic rituals. But any of these stories of the living playing with occult forces is nothing compared to the vast collection of undead apparitions said to have now made Greenwood their forever home. One of these legends of otherworldly encounters is the often-seen weeping woman of the Barrackman Steps. Greenwood Cemetery is made up of hills and valleys, and on one of these hills are 5 stone steps. These lead up to 4 gravestones of the Barrackman family. Throughout the years, there have been numerous reports of a woman standing on the top of the steps with her head bowed, crying. This broken-hearted specter only appears in the evening, near sunset. Once the sun disappears, she does likewise. But while the weeping woman has made a good amount of appearances, her legend pales in comparison to Greenwood's most famous tragic female resident. In 1930, a young couple was engaged to be married, but the young groom-to-be was a bit too wild for the family of his future bride. It seems that during these waning years of prohibition, this young man made his money selling illegal whiskey, which, while not being too terribly an uncommon profession at the time, could still be very dangerous. It was during one hot, dark summer night that the couple planned to meet up and finally run away together to elope. The plan was for two to leave just after midnight, and after the young man delivered his one last shipment of whiskey, which would supply him with the needed money for their wedding trip. But he never met up with his bride. Instead, he was murdered while delivering his whiskey, and the killer, a rival bootlegger, dumped his body into the Sangamon River. After waiting for him all night, the young would-be bride was told her fiancé's fate as his body had been discovered by local fishermen. After he was buried in Greenwood Cemetery, unable to face a life without him, the young woman plunged into the river and drowned. Her parents saw it fit to bury the girl in her wedding gown, and soon after stories began circulating about a young woman in a white wedding gown walking through the cemetery, weeping and looking through the headstones, presumably searching for her lost love. While the Greenwood Bride is one of the most well-known of the cemetery's ghost stories, she is not the strangest by any stretch of the imagination. One of the weirdest legends of Greenwood revolves around its devil's chair. The chair in question is actually what's known as a mourning chair, a bit of furniture placed in a grave so that the family and friends will have a place to sit when they visit their deceased loved ones. But according to some superstitions, when someone sits in one of these chairs, they will be cursed with bad luck or even die within the year. But of course, there are others that say that sitting in a mourning chair is actually good luck, or might even promise riches for those who take a load off in them. Superstitions are nothing if not inconsistent. But the ones revolving around the Devil's Chair in Greenwood Cemetery are a little different than the average mourning chair folklore. These stories say that if you sit in the chair in Greenwood at a certain time of night, you can make a pact with the devil himself. This pact will enable you to get anything you want for 7 years. Then, as is customary for any Faustian transaction, at the end of the 7 years, the devil will promptly come to collect your soul as fair payment. Interestingly, while many cemeteries have removed their mourning chairs because of the vandalism, Greenwood's chair remains. But what does not remain is the Greenwood Public Mausoleum, built in 1908 and demolished in 1967. According to the reports, the construction was shoddy and the mausoleum leaked. By the 40s, things got even worse and repairs were never made, so the mausoleum swiftly slid into complete disrepair. Soon, strange, unexplained reports of voices, crying, and screaming coming from the building began to spread. In 1957, the mausoleum was declared to be unsafe and was closed. Families were notified and asked to relocate their loved ones. Over 100 bodies were never claimed. Some were never identified. The cemetery buried these remains in several common graves, located across the road from the mausoleum after it was demolished. Now the site for the former mausoleum is still vacant, almost 45 years later. Across the road, several common graves hold their remains for over 100 unclaimed bodies. Reports of voices and screams continue to be heard in this area, along with eerie phantom lights seen moving at night among these common graves. But even these unnatural lights can't hold a candle to the most haunted area of Greenwood Cemetery. During the Civil War, troop trains on their way to the Confederate prison camps near Chicago would stop in Decatur. One such train stopped to unload most of its cargo, the bodies of Southern prisoners who had died of yellow fever on the way north. Wagons carried the Confederate bodies to the cemetery for a mass burial in a huge unmarked grave located on the side of the hill. But there are persistent rumors not all of those buried had yet died. After the war, a memorial in honor of Illinois' Union troops were built on the top of the hill. But several years later, the Sangamon River located next to the hill flooded. When the flood receded, it was apparent that many of the Confederate remains had been washed away. Those that were found were reburied and marked as unknown U.S. soldier. It was after the flood that stories of ghost soldiers began to be heard. Unexplained wailing, attributed to the tormented dead soldiers, was often heard in this area of the cemetery, as well as more phantom lights seen to flint rapidly through the graves, seemingly scanning the grounds. Local legends claim that lights belong to those lost Confederate soldiers, still searching for their missing remains. But most compelling are stories from visitors to the area who seemingly know nothing about the bizarre history of Greenwood and yet still talk of encountering the supernatural. Through the years, there have been nearly countless accounts from visitors actually seeing men in uniform walking among the tombstones. Many claim these uniformed men are semi-transparent or wreathed in some sort of glow. One popular ghost story said to have happened in the last 10 years begins with a young man walking around the road in the back corner of the cemetery. The boy claims to have seen a man standing on top of the hill, who then urges him to come closer. The boy approaches him and is surprised to see that he's wearing tattered, dirty gray clothing with spots on it that look to be blood. The man appears confused and asks if the boy could help him. The man then confesses that he doesn't know where he is and that he wants to go home badly. But before the boy can answer, the man in the gray, bloody coat vanishes right before his eyes. Most ghost stories revolve around longing for return. From the obvious want of the ghosts of these tales who wish to return to life, to the need from those who tell the tales to want to see their loved ones return to them, or just to see evidence that a return for anyone in any form is possible. Graveyards are meant to be a place for the living, to mourn and to visit their dead. Even if it's unnerving, doesn't the thought of ghosts loitering around their graves to visit the living provide an odd comfort? Does it not mean that this is proof that life doesn't have to end at the grave? But then, is the more uncomfortable thought that what it means is that life does indeed not end at the grave, but it still only goes as far as the gates of the cemetery? So, what do you think? Is Greenwood haunted? Will you be paying this otherworldly location a visit next time you're in the area? Are these urban legends made up? Let us know in the comments below, if you have the courage. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe for more videos from The Graveyard Shift.